Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life on the Magic Mountain YouTube series. I'm William Lee, and if you've been following along, we are now, I'm told by my Kindle app, that we're 12% through the book, so not that far along, and yet we've covered a lot of ground. So, just to reiterate, this series is comparing Thomas Mann's favorite, or sorry, no, I don't think it was his favorite of his novels, I don't know, but his famous novel, The Magic Mountain, which was published 100 years ago this year, so in 1924, and we're comparing Thomas Mann's depiction of life in a tuberculosis sanatorium in Davos, Switzerland, with the reality of that life. So I am the historian in residence for several months a year at Hotel Schatzalp, which was formerly the most luxurious sanatorium in Davos, Switzerland, and possibly in the world, back when it was called Sanatorium Schatzalp. And so I'm actively researching the history of Schatzalp and putting things together. And I am also making use of the Schatzalp diaries of Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich of Russia. So Hans Castorp was at the Magic Mountain between 1907 and 1914, the fictional Hans Castorp in the Magic Mountain. And Dmitri was at Schatzalp between 1939 and 1942. So there's a vast separation between the fictional man and the real man, a separation in time, a chronological separation. But there are some things that they still have in common. Some things had changed quite a bit in the sanatoriums, but anyway, that's a useful point of comparison. So forgive me if you already know all of this. So today we are up to a chapter called Satana Makes Shameful Suggestions. So Satana, if you recall, is Mann's ironic nickname for Herr Settembrini, the most important, I would say, of Hans Castorp's mentors. So Hans Castorp grew up without either a father or a mother, and the grandfather and then the great uncle who took care of him were not very active in his life, and so he is on an eternal search for father figures. Excuse me, Duke, come here. Had to yell at the dog there. We'll see if it works or not. So, of course, in any book of great literature, let alone one that's over 800 pages long, you have themes and motifs that are consistent throughout, and they have to be consistent throughout. So, this is a little distracting for you and I both. Duke, come here! Sorry, there are neighbors out and about, so the dog gets wound up. You can tell that I'm not on the Magic Mountain. I'm not at Schatzalp at the moment because they do not have that problem there. Okay, so his eternal search for father figures, and the father figures are divided between those who belong to the surface world and those who belong to the underworld. And the book itself, so that's a major theme, along with the nature of time, and overall with dichotomies and with the dual nature of everything, that nothing is simply as it seems, that everything has a dual nature, everything has other dimensions, and that a sanatorium is a place that sort of intrinsically brings those forward, brings those out, those other dimensions. And somebody like Castorp, who seems simple, meaning not stupid, but uncomplex, and Thomas Mann makes a point of calling him that at the beginning of the book. Their complexities are then brought to the surface. Okay, so I want to start by just saying a couple things, a couple sort of interesting but thematically inconsequential things about what the sanatoriums were like. So Thomas Mann and his wife were at a sanatorium called the Berghof. She was there, I believe, for several months. He was only there for a couple of weeks. And the Berghof was based on a real sanatorium called Wald Sanatorium. And so Thomas Mann describes there being a large flowered armchair in every room at the Berghof Sanatorium. And that seems to be consistent with what I've seen in photos of Schatzalp, of the rooms in Schatzalp. I have some very interesting ones from 1910. And I had always thought that they avoided anything with upholstery because it was easiest to disinfect things that were either washable, you could put in the laundry, or were a flat surface that could be wiped down. But no, they had these upholstered chairs in the rooms. I've seen photos of them, and I think I need to relook at those photos because it looks to me like the padding, the real permanent upholstery, is covered by something that, an attractive fabric that you could in fact take off and wash. Okay, and Thomas Mann also describes coconut runners in the corridors, so a kind of coarse, non-carpet but pleasant-looking, sturdy, something that's not going to wear out easily in the corridors. And I'm not sure if they had those. Again, I'm not sure if they had those at Schatzalp or not. The rooms had linoleum. They didn't have carpet, again, because of the ease with which it could be disinfected. And now in the hotel, there's carpet in the corridors, a really beautiful carpet that has been put in the last couple of years. But I honestly don't know what was there originally, so that's something I'm going to need to look at. So another thing that's mentioned in this chapter is something that was very real in Davos, which was music. So one of the things that they had to please both the tourists who came for winter sport or summer and the patients in the sanatoriums and the pensions was to provide really high quality music and frequent musical performances. So in this chapter, Kastorp is sitting on his balcony listening to the waning notes of an evening concert in Platz. So, and it's true, the sound carries very well. So if you're up at Schatzalp, you can even sometimes hear music that's played down in the valley or even on the opposite side of the valley. So these evening concerts, I believe, were played in the sort of pavilion, the gazebo, whatever you would call it, of the Kurgarten, which was part of the complex of the Kurhaus, which actually had a very close connection to Schatzalp. It was not a sanatorium, it was a hotel, and there was this whole complex with tennis courts and other things. And very often patients who were going to be checking in at Schatzalp would stay there until their rooms were free or their relatives would stay there. So yes, very closely connected to Schatzalp. And these musical performances were not only there, but all over. Most of the hotels offered concerts, and indeed the restaurant next door to Schatzalp up on the mountainside, because Schatzalp is quite high up on a mountainside and you have to take a cable car to get up there. And the restaurant next door to Schatzalp had concerts every Wednesday. So music was something that was important in the community. Okay, and then the other thing that he talks about sort of incidentally in this chapter is the kinds of things that the patients did in the evening after their final meal and before they returned to their rooms for their last rest cure before actually going to bed. So he lists dominoes, bridge, optical gadgets, so like kaleidoscopes and things like that. And then there was a piano, and usually there was at least one patient who knew how to play the piano and was willing to play the piano. And that public part of the sanatoriums, public meaning something for the patients in common, not for the general public to come in, the social rooms, as the translator calls them, and salons. So Schatzalp now, that part of the hotel is much more open. There you still have the Spielzimmer, the Schachzimmer, that has the English library, and it was a game room, board games, and then you have the X-ray bar, which has a piano and has an actual bar, but there were other salons. Originally, small salons. There was a reading room and things like that. And so in Thomas Mann's depiction of evening in the sanatorium, you have also a group of people, the people who sit at the so-called good Russian table. They withdraw together in one of these salons behind a curtain, and this sort of, reiterates the fact that sometimes, not always, that sometimes if there were a lot of people from a single nationality, they would tend to sort of flock together, you could say. And the good Russian table is a table with seating for 10 people, and they've gotten to know each other, and so they sort of withdraw from the rest of the crowd and speak Russian to each other. And Hans Castorp looks at that longingly because the woman he's falling in love with is one of those who is in that salon behind the curtain. Okay, so another thing that's going on is that Dr. Krakowski, the Hausarzt, the assistant doctor, is likewise there chatting with the patients. So the dogs. So, yeah, I don't know if that would have been a nightly occasion. Unfortunately, Dmitri was not spending time in the common areas. He liked to go over to the restaurant for tea or for lunch, and he liked to play cards in the rooms of other patients who were friends of his, not in the salons. And yeah, he wasn't really doing things in this space on the ground floor where patients could come and spend their evenings. Okay, so one more thing along this line before we dive into the thematic issues. And Hans Castorp is in this fuzzy-headed kind of state, and he's thinking about something that he thinks he hears a woman sitting at his table say, and she's boasting that she knows how to make 28 different fish sauces. And the rest of the evening, Hans Castorp is just really obsessed with that because it blows his mind. He can't imagine that there's 28 different fish sauces in the world, let alone that one person could know how to make them. And so when I get back to Davos in the spring, one thing I am going to make a point of doing is to ask our chef at Schatzalp, Bernd, if he has ever heard of 28 different kind of sauces for fish. So I shouldn't really say fish sauces because they're not necessarily sauces made of fish, but they're sauces to be served on fish dishes. So if I find out his answer to that, I will let you know. All right, so now we can start. This is a very long chapter. Many of the chapters in the book are quite short, maybe no more than 5 pages or even less. But this one is very long, and it has very important thematic material. And actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop and wait until the neighbors go in the house so that my dogs aren't upset. I don't know why they're playing right beside the fence, which abuts the street. But anyway, I will try to do the next part of this also this evening. So come back for that, and I'll see you then. Bye.